Hey everyone, it's October 16th, and for movie number 16 of 2016's Horror Movie Marathon Fest, I watched a fascinating documentary titled What We Do in the Shadows. And this is a documentary about vampires, particularly four vampires that live together in a flat, as they call it, in New Zealand. Uh, this documentary crew somehow got access and were allowed to follow these vampires around. The vampires are Vlad, Viago, Deacon, and Peter, and they all live together. And they're all different ages. Peter is the oldest and looks the most monstrous, I suppose. I don't want to be offensive to the vampires out there, but he looks, I guess the best way to put it, he looks like Nosferatu from the old movie. Maybe he was the inspiration. I don't know. Um, but really, this is interesting. It when the movie starts, excuse me, there are title cards, and it mentions this event called the Unholy Masquerade, and this is the documentary crew is going to film these vampires leading up to this big event, the Unholy Masquerade. So we really get to see uh, the day to day life of the modern vampire, at least in New Zealand. I don't know what vampires are like in other parts of the world. We're just seeing this sort of microcosm, I suppose. Um, and these guys, for lack of a better term, there are some normal aspects to their life. They argue about the chores and things. Um, but then, of course, they are vampires, so there are some rather bizarre aspects to their life, at least bizarre to us humans. Um, and there's a point, uh, I don't know how these documentarians did this without fearing for their lives the entire time. They were told they were guaranteed safe passage, essentially, but still, you never know. But there's a point where um, the vampires bring home a couple of humans and they're going to feed, but they end up turning one of them. And so now you have this brand new vampire that's joined the group, and you see how it changes group dynamics. And he helps to bring uh, these four a little more into the modern world. Because I guess when you've been alive for or undead for hundreds of years, you tend to get stuck in a rut, maybe, and not being a vampire, I don't know if your mind kind of gets set at a certain point in your history, um, because they still have a lot of old fashioned things that they do, and this new vampire that they create introduces them to the internet and gets them a new TV and really kind of brings them up to speed. And it's a fascinating look into a world that we really don't I don't think we understand. And we do see there's a group of a pack, I guess, of werewolves, and there's um, this grudge between the vampires and the werewolves. They they don't really get along too well, and it's the werewolves are pretty frightening. Um, and they eventually this all leads up to the Unholy Masquerade, and which has vampires and zombies and witches, and uh, an amazing affair. And we do go beyond that. There's some more of this documentary afterwards. There's some very funny stuff. I mean, these vampires were human once, and they still have some foibles, for lack of a better term. And there's some incredibly frightening stuff. Um, I commend the documentary film crew for sticking it out because I would have been freaked um, by some of the things that they caught on film. Just terrifying. Um, but really just this is an amazing documentary. Um, I highly recommend it for anybody who is interested in vampire society, um, and the I guess sort of that dark side of the world that we live in, the side that we don't really know anything about, the side a lot of people um, don't believe exists, but apparently it's out there because I just watched a movie about it. Um, and I guess it's fascinating. A lot of the things that we think of as vampire traits are true. We do. I mean, we see them change into bats and things, and apparently they can be killed by sunlight uh, or stakes. Um, but I guess there's a lot of things that we think of that probably aren't true. You know, that's human prejudice against the unknown. Um, but yeah, this was a really fascinating film. Um, so I would recommend it to anybody. Um, Now it's interesting the vampires, the creatures. I hope again that's not an offensive term. Um, they look very familiar. Uh, some of them. I don't know if you've ever seen the show Flight of the Concords, um, but the some of the creatures in this film look very similar to some of the actors in Flight of the Concords, and I don't know if they've fashioned themselves after these people that are on TV, or if maybe they're distant relatives. I don't know. The leader of the werewolves uh, looks. Reese Darby is an actor. He was in the show Wrecked. He was in an episode of the this past season of the X Files, and the leader of the werewolves looks suspiciously like him. Um, Again, they could be related. Maybe there's something about Reese Darby that we don't know. I'm not saying that Reese Darby's a werewolf. I'm just saying there's a werewolf in this movie that looks an awful lot like Reese Darby. Um, so that was really strange. But and I guess I've heard around the rumor mill that this documentary film crew, uh, I perhaps they just became fascinated with the pack of werewolves because I heard there's going to be a documentary about them as well. I guess that means the film crew survived, so that's a good thing. Um, but yeah, just a fascinating look into the dark side of the world, the supernatural side. There are surprises, there are laughs and shocks. It's an incredibly entertaining film, which is good. A lot, documentaries. You never know. Some, I guess, it depends on the subject matter. Some documentaries can be incredibly boring, even when they're informative. They can be really dry and slow and difficult to watch. And some I've seen a few documentaries that are a lot of fun. And this was, I'm not sure. I guess fun. Parts of it are fun. Parts of it are horrifying. It's a pretty interesting mix, but I recommend it, especially if you have any interest in that dark side of the world. Um, so that's it. That was movie 16 for October 2016. What We Do in the Shadows. It's I don't know if it's on Netflix. I have the DVD, but find it. I think it's on Netflix, but find it if you can. Um, don't let the fact that it's a documentary deter you because it's an incredibly fascinating film. So that's it for October 16th of this Horror Movie Marathon Fest, and I'll see you tomorrow.